So welcome to COPE's first 2023 leadership meeting. We're coming in kind of with a bang this year. This meeting is going to be focused on flood ready, and we actually started preparing, scheduling this back in October, not after all the floods happened. So thank you, floods, for your timing. To start with, is there anyone here that is new that would like to introduce themselves? It doesn't look like. Oh, okay. Diane, you want to unmute yourself and start?
Hi, I'm Diane Harris. My name has been on the leadership list for 2 years for Westview Meadows, just south of Healdsburg. And we now are actually getting up and running. So now I feel legit in joining you. I have a co-leader, Shar Nordstrom, but she just left Sunday for Thailand to do a lot of hiking. So we have 64 houses in our development. I have 6 neighborhood leaders. We're doing it by street. I'm now preparing the survey for them to, and thank you, Diane Urban, for your list, because it's worked really great. So we're in the beginning process of now getting everyone organized, but we do have leaders and neighborhood leaders, and we're getting going.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
So right now I wanted to let you know that the Sonoma County Area Agency on Aging is seeking feedback on the needs of programs for older adults, individuals with disabilities, and caregivers in Sonoma County. And if you're interested in taking their survey, I also will put the link into the chat, and you can follow that and provide feedback for them. Other announcements are we in our Google Workspace have created a leadership materials folder that is available to our leaders now. Also put the link in there, and some of the things that we're talking about today are in there for you to get access to. And 2 of those are actually, let me share my screen. Happens when you have too many things open. So the first one is we have protocol in there for handheld radios. So you can download that and use that with your neighbors and leaders. And then there's also in there is the a communications protocol that Fitch Mountain developed. It's tailored right now for Fitch Mountain, but it's in a Word document that you can take that and change it for your group, your leaders, and things like that. So there's those 2 documents are in there for you to download and use right now. Do not see Jeff on yet.
Diane, I have a quick question. This is Moni from Mill Creek. So thank you for sharing this. Is it okay for us if we download some of these documents? Is it okay to share them with our communities via our own websites? Obviously not the communications one for Fitch, but information about handheld radio protocols, etc.
Yes. The things in that folder are for you leaders to use as you need to, for your leaders and your group to get you organized. So it's part of, you've probably heard us mention, we're drafting a toolkit for you. You know, so we give you information, so it makes it easy for you to pass on, and that this is part of it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Cheers.
And we do have a draft toolkit in place right now. So we are progressing on that, and hopefully, you know, in the next month or 2, we'll be able to send that out to you also. Well, I am just going to go and pretend I am Jeff. So one thing that Jeff wanted to talk about was the Fire and Earthquake Safety Expo, which is coming on May 6th. You may have heard about it already, but this year is going to be at Healdsburg Community Center, not in Cloverdale. And they are looking for volunteers to help organize, volunteers the day of. And then also, if you were a exhibitor before, some of you, they are asking for you to fill out the form now to have a booth and that type of a thing. There'll be the email that we send out, as follow up from the meeting. There'll be more information in that, but just to let you know, to mark your calendars, and that is working in place. Diane?
Sorry. And so I assume, Cope, that we will have a booth?
Yes,
And-
everybody signed us up.
Okay, so part of your volunteering, Elsa and I would work to get, a list of Cope leaders who are willing to work that event, and we'll be in touch about that specifically. Great, okay.
And then the other thing Jeff was going to mention, because he is the one who actually ordered them, but I will share my screen and show you. We now have Coke polo shirts. This is the logo that we're having on the shirt, and we have ordered them for the board members and for Elsa. And we have it set up in Land's End that if any of the leaders, neighbors, actually anyone wants to purchase a shirt, you can go in and do that. You can pick the color shirt you want, whatever shirt, and then the logo's there to have it automatically put on. This image is also in the folder in our workspace, so you can access it through there.
That's brilliant. Thanks for doing that.
So are there any other announcements that anyone else has? Karen?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not, but just kind of wanted to mention, if you know anyone in the Windsor area, we're trying to get Windsor Cope started up again. And so we have a couple of community meetings that we will be putting out to get that going. And then after the Fire and Earthquake Expo, we, Sonoma County Fire District, in partnership with the town of Windsor, we're also going to be hosting a pancake breakfast on Mother's Day and town emergency preparedness fair then too. So we'll be reaching out soon, but also looking at having some representatives come out and help us out with that too. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Mother's Day, May 14th. It's a tricky one, but it's pancake breakfast, which is the tradition that firefighters usually do. And then we're just kind of coupling it and making that emergency preparedness part of it with the town as well.
Very nice. Thank you.
I have a very quick announcement. I think it's pertinent because all of you know him, Dan Grout, who is the other lead over in our Mill Creek Cope. He had surgery today and he came out with flying colors and is recovering well. And I'm sure everybody would want to know that he is on track. We'll hear more at the end of the week.
Yeah. Well, wish him well for us.
Will do.
If there's no other announcements, I'll pass this over to Nancy for our tip.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. I suspect it won't be a surprise to anybody that our tip today is going to be about flooding. The saying is turn around and don't drown. And I think this is a pretty dramatic example from just last week. And if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, it doesn't seem like you could have that much water in this road. But that's exactly what happened. And the road is tagged, the road may flood. And you can see here how much water ends up on that road. And obviously, anybody could make this mistake because two different people did at the same time. So our judgment is not that great. So when you see water, if you can't see the paint, if you have any idea that it might be more than an inch, let's just not do that, because this year we rescued a lot of people from water. We had a fatality, unfortunately, from somebody who did get into water they couldn't get out of and couldn't get rescued from. And these are absolutely preventable things that it's just We think we know how deep the water is. Obviously, these people thought they knew that they could handle the water, and it just doesn't turn out that way. That it turns out that water is very different looking when you get in it. This road, as I said, when you look at this road, you can't even believe it could have that much water on it. It doesn't even look like it's capable of doing that, but yet there it was. A prime example of how poor our judgment is when we're trying to estimate how deep water is, when we're trying to make a decision to drive through it. So as the rule of thumb is often, if you can see the paint, go ahead. If you can't see the paint, don't go. I know some folks talk about, oh, I get out and I walk in it a little bit to make that judgment. And I don't know that that's a really good choice because, the water can move pretty quickly. I have a video of this water. This water is moving pretty fast. I'm surprised the cars are stationary because this water was actually moving pretty fast downstream to the great big ocean. So it's just a very important thing. I know that not all of you live, near the river, but all of us live in places that get water pooling. So we all have roads that dip down and that get lower. And we just don't want to lose any more residents in Sonoma County due to flooding like this. So please turn around, don't drown. Any questions on my hot tip for today? Okay, I am going to stop sharing if I can. There we go. I did it. All right, I'm all done, Diana. Back to you. You are on mute. Still on mute. There you go.
I am going to pass it over to Elsa. She has the spotlight.
Beautiful.
Hi everyone, hello. So today we are not spotlighting a COPE group. I'm going to ask you guys a question and we want to know what effects did your neighborhood experience during these January rainstorms and how could have COPE have assisted your neighborhood better? So feel free to share with us how it was like.
Well, this is Marshall. I don't have a story to share, but I personally believe that the COPE efforts actually prevented emergencies from happening. And I'm not saying all the bad stuff happened where there wasn't COPE, but I know in Northeast Geyserville they put out a message for folks to stay off the road on the bad rain days. And one other group did that as well. So at least in the Northern Sonoma County Fire District, there was no fatalities. And we didn't have anybody drive into water or anything that we would otherwise consider preventable. So I think that actually COPE did a great amount of mitigation to get the message out to everybody. So not how COPE could be better, but just that I think COPE did a great job. So that's it.
Thank you, Marshall. That's nice to hear too, that we were, the efforts that we did were successful. Diane?
Just building on that, because of the communication we have with COPE, right? Because it's set up. We're out in Marshall's area in Alexander Valley, but part of the town of Hillsburg, West Soda Rock, can flood. It did in 2019, and but because we have the group me and we have text set up and all of that, people were very informed about what the height was. And we know when it gets to 25 to 27 feet at a certain place, then there's a certain throughput in Cloverdale. And because of COPE, we have a mechanism for the people who are in the know to share with everyone. And it's not just the COPE leaders, we have a lot of people in agriculture here who are very knowledgeable. And so I don't step in as the COPE leader. I let other people in the community who are more in the know. And Diane Harris, it's just to kind of, root you on, it's awesome that your group is starting, and it's not just wildfires, it's for, any situation where we need to reach out to neighbors, and you don't have to be the one who knows, I guess would be the message I have, that there are other people in your community.
I will say that was one of the things when I had the neighborhood leaders over to my house on Saturday, January 7th, when it was pouring rain. And I made the comment that this wasn't only fire or earthquake, but it was also flooding. And the way our neighborhood is set up, we do have culverts that are mapped that flow through the area, but we did have a backlog and a small slide on the road going down to Los Amigos Road. And that was one thing that we all sort of sat up and go, okay, we need to pay attention to this. So it was at the very beginning, but it was a reinforcement for why we need to do this. So
Good.
Yes, so from our perspective, it's 10 miles of road, so I don't have exact eyes on what went down through all of those and the tributaries. I haven't heard anything at any rate. I think Marshall would have more information than I do. But one, I was very grateful to receive the COPE NOSOCO announcement with kind of like how things are going, where the flood is going to happen. I redistributed that to our community, and people were very grateful to receive it and had some follow-up questions. I was able to direct them to some resources. So thank you for sending that in the middle of all of that water. One thing that I realized was, so towards the 9,000 block of our area, there was a sinkhole, and it just the pavement just basically gave in, and it's now kindly sliding into the creek, I guess. And I realized I don't know who to tell. So I think that was the thing that I thought maybe I need to get better at finding out information of how do I report slides, trees on the road. We also had tons of those, and sinkholes. So I just for myself made a note of I need to find more information about that. So I would love it if you can point me to where I can find that information, or just let me know who I should be calling. Thank you.
Okay, I think either in our newsletter or our Facebook page, we did post a link. Nancy, the county, do you know offhand the county roads?
I don't know offhand, but it is in part of our, so here, let me share my screen real quick and let me just kind of walk you through where the information is on the county pages.
Hey, Nancy, I'll just jump in real quick while you're doing that.
Sure.
So if it's like a major hazard, like someone could drive into it or something, 911 is always applicable. I know out there you don't have cell coverage. Well, maybe you do at that spot, but not with the new tower. But always call 911 if it's imminent. Otherwise, it gets tricky whether you use the SOCO reported app or some type of non-emergency. Ultimately, it needs to get into the EOC during these storm events, and that's something like I could do if you call or email me. That's where to go or get reported to county road. So if you call 911, the fire department can't do too much other than go out there and verify it's a problem. But ultimately, you need to get to county roads, and that's what gets tricky. Is everybody gets overwhelmed. So if you just keep record, if it's kind of like not emergency, not imminent, that's the best way to do it. And then let all your community know too. I know Franz Valley, they had a whole chain going on, email and text during the storm about trees and things to avoid just in their community that were low priority for county roads to deal with. So
thank you, Marshall. That's great. Cheers.
Yeah, I was
So
just,
if you take a look here, can you see my webpage?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if you go here on the emergency section and you go to flooding, you can see here that there's an actual page for road closures. So they'll tell you what roads are closed, what roads aren't closed. To report it, though, I agree that with Marshall that the best way to actually report it would be to let him know, or even dial 911, or just to give them the information on a flooded road, because that's a life safety issue. So that's something we want to know about right away to make sure that people know that's happening.
Cheers. Thank you, Nancy.
Hi, Donna.
Anyone else have something they want to share about, Karen?
Thanks, Diana. Yeah, so public infrastructure. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that County Roads, TPW is now Sonoma County Public Infrastructure, Sonoma County PI. And they do have a Facebook page that they were putting out information. They actually had a special number just for these types of things, storm related, that you could call in a report that maybe weren't that 911 reporting. So they do that. So kind of, you might want to follow them on social media as well as another resource for you in your communities. They were excellent assisting us. We were out there on back-to-back tons of calls with roadway hazards. So another good resource is now public infrastructure, Sonoma PI.
Thank you, Karen.
So Karen, was that just distributed through the Facebook or was it on their website? You know what?
I think they put it on their website too, and I saw it on their Facebook. I was trying to look really quick in between things, but I've got so many windows, I didn't get to it quite yet. But if I can find it, Diana, I'll throw it in the chat here.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Anyone else before we move on to talk about our upcoming webinar?
Thank you. So I'm going to discuss for just a few minutes our upcoming webinar. So we don't want to give away all the information from the webinar because then you won't want to go to the webinar, and that would be sad. The other thing about the webinar is we'd love it if you would please invite your neighborhood group to attend the webinar. So we have some really great information. The first person who's going to speak is Sage from my office, and Sage is our flood guru in the department. So Sage will be able to talk with us about kind of the deep dive into where the flood risk is in the county and kind of the history of flood risk in the county to try to help people kind of understand some of the different ways that they might have flood risk in Sonoma County. Now, outside of that, of course, we all have risk of flood from normal drainage things. So besides just the river, we have seen, I think Diane, you mentioned maybe Diane as well, that, you know, roads that don't normally carry flood risk may have carried flood risk in this particular event because there was so much water so many days in a row. The river just couldn't keep up with all of that, nor could a lot of the different drainage things. So Sage is going to talk a lot about flood risk in the county and really help us kind of get our head around how concerned we should be about flood based on where we live. In just a minute, Diana's going to show you another really cool tool about floods as well. And then Misty from the Sheriff Office is going to talk about evacuations and safety in floods and safety in evacuations. So it's a little bit different. We don't, of course, just because it's raining, everybody doesn't necessarily want to evacuate, but when we do find that you're in an evacuation zone, I know you guys all know, if we give an evacuation warning as opposed to an evacuation order, you don't have to leave, but we certainly think it's a great idea. So if you have somebody you can go visit that lives in dry land, go visit them. No point in just waiting around until we actually call an evacuation order. And then, of course, if you do have an evacuation order, we really need you to go, especially in a flood, because we can tell you absolutely that people have had to risk their lives over and over again all across the state in these last floods, rescuing people who did not leave their homes, but then found themselves in a world of trouble because they didn't leave their homes and didn't understand how wet their area was going to be and how much flooding was going to happen. So then they're in danger and somebody has to risk their life to go rescue that person. So we don't want to be those people because we're much better informed, right? So we know it's better to, if you get a warning and you have somewhere else to go, go. And if you don't have somewhere else to go and you want to wait it out, certainly when you do get an evacuation order, it's time to go. Make sure that your neighbors who might need a lift can go as well. One thing you may or may not know, if you have neighbors who don't drive and you're thinking, well, I don't really want to take them with me to my aunt's house in San Francisco, so should I offer them a ride or not? Because what am I going to do with them once I get them in the car? And I think sometimes people have that hesitation that they have someone who doesn't drive, but they don't want to take responsibility for them for the duration of the disaster, right? You are welcome to take that person and bring them to the shelter, and the shelter will look after their medical needs and other things. So we have, our shelters are all ADA compliant. If there's a county shelter open, everybody is welcome. If they're going to need extra help, if they're going to need help contacting other family and friends, if they're going to need help with other things, there's people at the shelter who can help them with that. All you have to do is offer to give them a ride to the shelter. So not as big of an ask as now I have to keep this person with me for 2 weeks or for a week or for 4 days. So if you have people in your neighborhood that you know don't drive and may not have a really good plan to get out, I think offering them a ride to a shelter is a really good way. And then after that, the people at the shelter will be able to assist them with whatever their needs are. And then, of course, we have found in this last disaster that 211 was a really amazing resource for people who were able to call 211 because they needed something. So in some cases, they needed there was a lot of people down in the Guerneville area who have fifth wheel trailers down by the river, and they don't have any way to tow them. So they needed help getting their trailer up and out, which was also their home. And they were able to call 211 who could connect them with resources at the county that could get that done. People that needed, that had their power out and needed to go somewhere because their power had been out for too many days, 211 was able to connect them with PG&E resources. So there's a lot of resources at 211. So please don't hesitate to call if you have a question in a disaster. If you need help, if somebody in your neighborhood needs help, they have a lot of resources that they can provide for people that I think it sometimes gets lost in the shuffle, that there's these resources available. If you're normally very, very self-sufficient, you're not used to looking for these types of resources. Some people are really good at looking for resources all over the place. They need assistance a lot, so they know where to find these things. Other people don't ever look for resources, so when they do need help, they don't know where to go. And 211's a really great choice of where to go and look for that. During the seminar, I'm also going to be talking about preparedness. So we're going to talk a little bit about preparedness and how preparedness works for floods that's slightly different. The good news is, of course, a go bag's a go bag. So if you have your go bag ready, you're ready for whatever reason you need to leave your house in the hurry. So whether it's water rising, whether it's a fire beating down on your neighborhood, your go bag is a great resource. But of course, this time of year, we always like to have people take a look at their go bag and see what they might need in there in wintertime that's different than you need in the fire season. So, you know, do you need an extra sweatshirt in there? Do you need some long underwear? Do you need a couple pair of socks? Some things like that that you might not have in your go bag in the middle of summer, but you do want to go ahead and add to that in the middle of winter. So those are the 3 topics we're going to be covering. And then the third thing we're going to be doing is, of course, a question and answer. So I think this is a really important time for people to connect with our subject matter experts and ask them questions that they've been wondering about. And so if you have questions, please bring those with you, because I think these people, Sage and Misty, are both excellent experts at what they do and can answer all those questions for you. The other thing we wanted to ask today was, you know, we do have a pretty set agenda, but we do have a little wiggle room in that agenda. So we did want to bring it back to this leadership team and ask you, are there any other flood related topics that you want to make sure that are covered in this webinar, so that we can be sure to have our experts ready to cover the information that's most important to you? So I'll just throw that out to you guys and see if anybody has something that they really think is important. Yeah, Brenda.
Let's see, I'm unmuted. So I just want to point out that my area was in the 2K2 zone, that we were under a warning, and being that we're on West Side Road, way out there, our location is really not that close to the flood area because we're so far from the Russian River. There were some people that made comments, I can't believe we're under a warning being this far out. And I said, well, it's our zone, you know, it's our zone. Well, then they said, well, maybe the county should rethink the zone. I'm just bringing this forward, that this might come up, that maybe we have to take the 2K2 and then have a radius around the Russian River and call it something else. But so I did send out the warning, and I did get a little bit of backlash, but, you know, I handled each one individually as it came about. But that is something that the county may want to consider.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Brenda. And I'll make sure that Misty has that information. So she will, first of all, have it because the Sheriff's Department's in charge of developing those zones. And second of all, maybe have an opportunity to kind of think that through a little bit beforehand. So totally appreciate that.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, Marshall.
I was just gonna, I mean, I had the same thought, so I'll give you guys some background because I helped develop those evacuation zones back in the day. Flooding was really not a consideration. So one thought I had was, make the zones based on the 100-year floodplain, and you could further divide them up. I don't know if that's worth it or not. And then the other thing I thought about is, even though, the west side of West Side won't get flooded, if Wooler Road gets flooded, if West Side down to Hacienda gets flooded, then you only know you can get West Side Road back to Hillsburg. So it's maybe more just knowledge for people that they may get blocked in. But I know that's a rare event for out there too. So I'm trying to find the county map that got put together that showed the flood level at I think 39 feet or 40 feet at Kernville. That it kind of shows, where the problems are. So that's another way to look at it, Brenda. But I totally get that argument as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marshall. Karen?
I was just going to say kind of what Marshall said there, that when we were working on those evac zones, when I was at the sheriff's office, it really was kind of fire on the mind with creating those. And but I know, like, when the National Weather Service puts out warnings as such, not just DEM and the rest of our county, but it's also for those tributaries and smaller creeks. And a lot of people might not be thinking about those, just the Russian River. So it's for those other smaller creeks and tributaries that we may already see flooding. And then earth movement is a big concern for us too. So some of these steeper areas, we worry about earth movement and landslides a little bit that could close off those areas of egress and ingress. One suggestion I have, Nancy, that maybe Misty could help answer, or someone else, but giving one feedback that we got is that people understand, okay, turn around, don't drown, right? We've put out that messaging across the board everywhere, but what are some other things that people could do if they did find themselves in the situation where the waters are, maybe they didn't see the floodwaters, it was dark, and all of a sudden they're in some floodwaters, or if they get off the roadway, end up in water, kind of what are those steps to survive if your car gets flooded. So we always tell people, sure, use that, which is basically stop, get unbuckled, break a window, roll down the windows and get out. So there's a bunch of those tips online, but I just want to make sure that that is mentioned because it might come up too for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. Appreciate that. Anybody else? I really appreciate your feedback, you guys. This is going to make the webinar in general much more valuable to us as a community. So that's super awesome.
Nancy and Elsa, just for easier distribution, if the person who generated the flyer could export it into a PDF instead of a JPEG, then the registration link comes through and it's easier for people to just be able to just click on the flyer as you distribute it. Right now it was scraped, and so that would be brilliant.
We do have it in a PDF already. So
Okay. The
yeah,
ones that
and-
were shared were JPEG, sorry. So if you have it somewhere, that would be fantastic.
You're talking about the webinar, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
the web, yeah. It's only on a JPEG, but yeah, just drop a copy on that same folder and then we'll be good.
Thanks.
Okay. So if it's not in there right now, the PDF, I'll make sure it gets in there.
Thank you, Diana. That's brilliant.
And that's actually what I was going to say, that we do have it in the folder, so it's easily for you to share with your neighbors. The other thing is, for those of you who do Facebook, we have the information on our Facebook page that you can easily share with others. And during the floods and any other emergencies, we post more information on our Facebook page than we do in the emails, because we don't want to keep hitting you with emails. But on Facebook, we post several things a day and share other things. So if you're interested, following us on Facebook, you can get more information.
I follow you on Facebook, and all I do is scrape that information, lift it and send it on emails, because in our community, the representative age skews towards no Facebook access. So I just lift them up and just replicate. So
Nice.
it depends on the audience.
Thanks.
Anybody else have any comments on the webinar? Okay, I think I will turn it back to you then, Diane.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I want to share my screen and I am going to go to SoCo emergency. Just to kind of walk through it, this is where Nancy started, but we're going to go into the get ready. And for those of you who haven't been in here, if you go down into the potential hazards in here, and then you go into floods, this gives the information about how to prepare for floods and things like that. And there's the FEMA flood map right here. You click on that. It'll give you the information that they have mapped for different flood hazards. And here I'll just put in Healdsburg. And it will pop up here. I will zoom out so you can see. So it is broken up into these different sections here. This is your marker of where you are. You could actually put in your actual exact address, and that's where the marker will go. So I want to give you a little explanation of this legend, because this legend is not easy to understand. I think they need a legend for their legend, tell you the truth. So let me zoom in on this one. And you'll see that they have different colors for the different areas. Okay. This distinction here is the river and adjacent land. And that's what they call the regulatory floodway. So basically that is where, you know, in a basic flood, that the water is going to go. And that's what these little wiggle lines are. And that's the elevation here. So those are areas that are typically you really want to stay away from, that this is the river and adjacent. And so the next one is a baseline flood elevation that comes out to here, this color. So what this tells you, you know, if you're in this area or in the other blue, your chance of receiving floodwaters is very high. So you need to be, stay alert, have the preparation and all that type of thing. So the next level is the brown color in here. So what they've done is they've mapped out levels of potential hazards, basically, distinguishing by color. Now, I want you just to be aware that they have not mapped everything. Just because there's no color outside of a certain area doesn't mean that there's no risk. They've mapped the highest potential. And you'll see areas somewhere in here. They do have a line that says study area, outside of study area. Here, limit of study area. Okay, so this is the extent that they've mapped up on the tributary. The threat doesn't just stop here, obviously. So if you live upstream of that tributary, there's still potential hazards. So just be aware of what their intent was versus mapping the whole entire area. Are there any questions about this? And I can't see hands, so just unmute yourself if you do.
This is Brenda, and I think I've looked at some of these maps before, but I find part of it confusing because I don't see any roads actually listed. Am I correct on that?
On this one?
Yeah.
So if you go to, I just clicked on
I can
right
see it
here.
Yeah, now, okay, straight view. I can see it now. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not the most intuitive map, but it does give you some good information if you're wondering about, you know, really what your flood risk looks like in your individual homes. I think it's helpful for that. Or your place of work, things like that, where your mother lives, where your son lives, those kinds of things, if you're wondering about those types of things, or the likelihood if you're going somewhere and it's raining heavily, if that's likely to be dry. So It has some uses. It's not a perfect tool for sure.
Right. And like I said, the legend is very confusing. I had to go search things to actually understand the legend. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was,
One second, did you share the link to that?
it should be in the chat. Elsa put it in there already.
Okay, I'll try to find it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
You
up.
can
a little-
also get to it from the from SoCo Emergency.
Right, the pathway I did to get there. So we designed a flyer to help our leaders get their neighborhoods a little more prepared for floods. And the flyer is to basically have a gutter day if you want, or just to pass the flyer out to help you. So the idea is that, you know, drainage is the problem when it comes to floods, and blockages on street gutters, blockages in ditches. You know, it doesn't take much for water to start backing up, and then more debris gets in there and it just starts building. So make sure that, you know, your neighborhood, you periodically have your street gutters cleared, drainage ditches cleared, and then of course your house gutters, because we all don't want to be in the middle of the night and have our gutters overflowing and keep us awake. I've been there. So we have in the folder, we have a flyer in the folder for you to, this is this, nope, that's not it. Let me pull it up. So in the folder, we have it in PowerPoint, we have one in JPEG, and we also have one that is actually in Word, so you can change it. There it is, just pulled it up. So this is the one that is in Word. And we have, like I said, two of them. This is one that you can actually tailor here to put your COPE group in. And you'll start out, we suggest you start out with just calling it, you know, let's gather together to clean out our gutters. If you want to add additional things, then, you know, you could help the neighborhood pick up other debris and things like that if you wanted to. But this one is, you can come in and change your name. This one is actually ready that you can just send out as is. Say you just want to send it to your neighbors that they individually go through and take care of their own property. So we have those two different ones in there. And like I said, they're in the folder, they're both in the folder. There's the PowerPoint version. There's the JPEG of just sending it out for information, and then also in the Word. Any questions about how to use those, or suggestions on what might be better? Okay.
Those look great. Thank you.
And, you know, if any time you have information that you want us to help you with, because right now we are trying to come up with these flyers with these, you know, some protocol guidelines and things like that to help you guys. So if you have ideas, you know, send us an email and we'll take a look at it and see if we can come up with something. So right now I'm going to pass it over to Elsa. We're going to do breakouts.
Okay, guys, we're gonna do breakout rooms. And we're just gonna talk about how will you use tools like the flood ready flyers in your neighborhood, and what else do you need? So I'm gonna put you with someone from the board, and we'll see you right now.
everybody back?
I
We've all
think-
been muted, so I think we're back.
So does someone from each group want to share something? If any information for the group?
Susie does.
Yes, I'll go first. Yeah, I'm reporting for ours. We were talking about the information that's in that Google Drive, I guess it is, and thinking that some of that might be good to put on Nextdoor. I know you put things on Facebook, but we were thinking Nextdoor might be good because there's a lot of interaction, and some people are more likely on there. But the size of the documents doesn't always come out right on Nextdoor. And I don't know if you know anything about that or anybody else does on how to format it so that you get the full picture of it. So that was one of the things that we talked about is using the tools that would be helpful. And what else did we talk about? Mostly that. And oh, and different, yeah, that we don't have any problem in Cloverdale. And I don't remember what Rebecca said, if she had any of her neighbors had problems, but we're not in on streams. So ours is more neighborhood flooding from drainage outlets, you know, on the streets getting plugged up with leaves. That sort of thing is one that I worried about, but actually, I don't think we had any of that. Just rain coming off of hills into people's yards was a problem. So that's all that we had.
So Elsa, I think if we could figure out how to create like one-page templates that would have the right size art and then the blurb you would put. So all somebody had to do is just copy and paste it and have a Facebook one and a Nextdoor one, so it'd be easy. I think that was our takeaway, right, Susie?
Yes, and that
Okay.
Rebecca has actually a Nextdoor group for her COPE group, and she distributes information that way.
So I would like to ask if anyone knows about having a Nextdoor business page to contact Elsa. We do have Nextdoor for COPE,
Oh,
but it's not working how we want it. So if you're familiar with the business one, please talk to Elsa about it.
Well, and I also was saying that, you know, I think that the neighbors on Nextdoor pay more attention to their own neighbors because there's so many ads now that have cropped up on Nextdoor that it's much more powerful if your neighbor is sending it to you and sending it out than it is, you know, a business. So that's just a consideration.
mhm. Right.
I'll report for our group, which is small. Linda from Cloverdale and I talked. Moni had to leave, so we didn't have benefit of her insight for a really long period of time. Everybody agreed the folder is a great idea as a repository for materials and information. Actually, Linda was suggesting that having information and having it available in little face-to-face get-togethers is a really good way to distribute material. And she was sharing the fact that in Cloverdale, some of these, you know, meetings around the square and so forth, it's a nice opportunity to have a little, you know, pop-up experience where people can access information. We also talked about the fact that even though sometimes events and things aren't real well attended, it doesn't mean that they're not successful, to the extent that sometimes a participant will be a neighbor and will be a resource for some people right around them who haven't necessarily attended, but will, you know, contact and be in touch with them if an emergency arises. And we talked again about the fact, as so often is the case, that people often don't access information or try to get a hold of it unless they're right in the emergency. Unless, you know, people don't get things unless all of a sudden they need things. But the idea that if at least they know where they can find information, even if they don't know what it is until they need it, that in itself is a service. So did I misrepresent anything, Linda, or is there anything else you want to add? You're muted. You need to unmute.
Very well done. Thanks so much, Donna. You caught it.
Okay.
So in my area, I brought up the fact that we didn't have flooding, but we did have to shelter in place. Some of the neighbors did on Felta Creek Road. We had at 2 separate times trees go down where it actually blocked the road. It's a very small private road. And so the importance of sheltering in place comes more than just flooding because you can't get out, but it was one of those situations where the neighbors really do step up and take care of that road and remove the trees in a pretty fast manner. But, you know, it requires certain neighbors with the proper tools to do so. So they really came together on this one.
Anyone else from another group?
So Rhonda and I were in a group, and we had a short amount of time, but both agreed that we could use the flyers. And then Rhonda brought up the emergency evacuation zones and how even though, you know, we've used them in the fires, people still don't remember their zone or don't write it down, and that sometimes is a challenge. And she's thinking about posting, you know, your zone on their community sign, and a few other things that we talked about that. I'm wondering if we shouldn't make up little memory phrases to help us remember our zone. You know, if mine's 1G2, then maybe I should come up with a word for the G so I don't forget G.
Maybe we could make little refrigerator magnets that have the number right, or has it right on there.
I have a great one. I have a great one for our. I have a great saying for ours that I came up with. Ours is number 2 and the letter B. And so my phrase that I tell people is to be evacuated or not to be evacuated.
Good.
It helps.
So I think Rhonda wanted to comment, so you'll need to unmute yourself, Rhonda.
There, I did it. Hi. I was thinking about when you mentioned the sign, Patty, our community fire signs, we got stuck during winter having a repetitive kind of, the red blades weren't really relating to the season. And I wanted to take them down, and my partner, Pat Abercrombie, said he didn't want them to look stolen or something like that. So I was just listening to our discussions, and it seems like there could be a set of winter signs that would be very, very helpful. I heard check your drains and gutters. That would be a really great thing to have up there. Do you know your evacuation zone? They're probably, for those of you that are really involved in the flood and water aspect, which I'm learning about, I think we could probably come up with maybe 3 signs. And I think they're cheaper. I don't know if Marshall's still there. He probably is. They're cheaper if we do them, agree as a group. And then the 6 signs or whatever number that are around could agree to put those up in the wintertime. Anyway, that was my suggestion.
And since we were talking about signs really, really quick, if your zone or your group encompasses, you know, certain zone or maybe a couple of zones, it's also a good idea. And I've seen other neighborhood groups put their evacuation zone right on a sign in kind of like, well, I'm referring to like neighborhood watch groups where they would put it right at the entranceway to places. They also put their zones right on there too, so that you're constantly driving by that or checking that or seeing that. So it's just another visual reminder as you're going. So that's another kind of thing that I've seen starting to pop up.
The other thing is we have drafted up some postcards for COPE, and one of them has emergency numbers and the other side is a place to write your zone on it. So that's something that could be, you know, put on your refrigerator. We don't have those printed yet, but we do have the digital copy if anyone wanted to get those. And actually, we should put those in that folder. We'll put those in the folder. Anything else?
Anybody else? Yep. Patty, did you have more to say?
No, that was the extent of our conversation.
If nobody else has any, do we have any other agenda items, Diana?
Susie's raising her hand.
I
Right.
have one quick question. Has that folder been shared with us yet? Or, I mean, are you sending out an email with a link? Or I'm looking at my Google Drive shared with me and I'm not sure what to look for.
Susie, it's open to anyone who has the link, and Elsa did put it in the chat, but we will put it in the newsletter that we send out for this.
Okay, because I don't get things out of the chat very well.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not very clever about that. Thanks.
Since we have time, I was going to share a story about the Russian River and how I learned great respect for the river early on in my career. Back in the 80s, I was working for Department of Water Quality Control Board, and I was monitoring the river. There was a station up in Ukiah, Wooler Bridge, and at Cook's Beach. And what we were doing, we had continuous monitoring of basically water coming into a resin column. And then we would test the column to see if there are any contaminants in it and that type of thing. So at Ukiah, there was a pickup park near the river with the device. At Wooler Bridge, the unit was sitting on top of the catwalk over the fish ladder, if you're familiar with that area. And then at Cook's Beach, we had a mobile laboratory there, which was basically an RV that was converted over. So every day I did my rounds and checked everything. Well, one day I actually called the water agency recorded line to see what the river was doing, because it was raining very hard and everything was supposed to be fine. I checked on the Wooler Bridge, checked on the Cook's Beach, and we had someone there from the Conservation Corps living there because of safety issues. Got back to the office, everything was still fine. I went to Ukiah. By the time I got to Ukiah, the water was up halfway up to the wheel, but I was able to drive it out. It was a gravel bar, so it wasn't flowing like the channel. So, you know, I got that out fine. By the time I got back to the office in Santa Rosa, they told me that they had to tow the mobile lab out of the water. I went back to the Wooler Bridge station, and all that was there was this plastic bag tethered down to the device in the water, floating around. That's all there was. So it didn't take long. I mean, if it was, I'm talking about a matter of just a few hours by the time that I, you know, by the time I visited Wooler Bridge twice, and it had risen feet. So when they say the river's rising, believe it and get out. And that point, I actually do want to be back then they weren't given projected water levels on that recording. Now we have a lot more information distribution.
And
I would have to say that the Wooler Bridge community, that because my Coke group, you know, starts on East Side Road, goes over the bridge, and then goes on both directions on West Side. And so most of us are accustomed to the flooding, and we know that we either get isolated or you get out. Most of us do not flood because we're above the flood level. But it's been very helpful having the generators in place. It's been helpful having the emergency supplies. So being more organized because of the fires also makes us feel more prepared during these flood periods. So all
nice.
good work.
And I think Marshall put in the chat the link to the map that has and this is it's maybe about 8 months old, that you can now print a PDF of your evacuation zone as well. Just so you know, the reason you can print an evacuation zone PDF is because the community told us we want to be able to print our zone. And so the GIS team responded to the community and created a PDF for every single zone. So that was a lot of work, but community input makes a difference. So good job. Anything else? Elsa, anything else? Diana, anything else? Looks like we have 10 minutes to give you back in your life. So if you have another Zoom meeting starting at 5, you have a 10-minute break.
Just a reminder, the webinar is February 1st at 5 o'clock. So please attend and share it.
Nice. All righty. Bye, everybody. See you next month, and see you on
Thank
February
you.
1st.
Thank you.
Bye.